Welcome back to the Hawkeye Garage. I am Joe. This week, well, I've been quarantined. Well, I haven't really been quarantined. I had to go to work every day. We finally have been working on the Grand Cherokee. I'm working on taking the rear axle out of that, so we are going to take a closer look at what's going on there. But first off, we need to talk about something. You may have already caught it before this video. You probably definitely caught it at the beginning of the video. A little bit of this going on right there. The name change. What is going on? We are no longer Hawkeye Skunk Works. If you weren't already aware of the origination of Skunk Works that started back during World War II, it was basically a top secret division of a company that made stuff for the military. We're not going to talk about that. They used that skunk logo, and when this all came about, that name kind of, I'm a fan of the military and I'm a fan of America and stuff like that, and the term Skunk Works has been applied to other high performance, top secret, automotive, pew pew stuff, and we changed the logo, obviously, and because we were under the impression that that was all public domain. Anyway, turns out it's not. I got a nice letter from a law firm telling me to stop using the name and stop using that logo. So, whatever, it's not a big deal. So right now, we are transitioning into a new logo. You may have seen a couple logos floating around on my YouTube channel. I'm not even sure what logo is going to be posted when this video goes out, because we've kind of, like I said, we've been transitioning. My Instagram, the Facebook, and there's probably stuff listed under the Hawkeye Garage, HSW Garage. Like I said, we're still kind of navigating where we want to go with that. And yeah, if you've got any opinion or comments, leave that down below. The Hawkeye comes from, I live in Iowa, so, and just the general Hawkeye, that can be used other things. So anyway, that's where that is all coming from. Yes, the Grand Cherokee is in the garage, and I've been tearing that apart. I've got some parts laid out over here. Let's grab the camera and go take a closer look. All right, we've got this is the driver's side rear axle of my Grand Cherokee. It looks like a much bigger mess than we've got going on, but it's really not too bad. I've got my brake dust shield assembly held up by zip tie, and the brake caliper behind it also held up by zip tie. Basically, I've gone through and disconnected all of the brake line brackets from the rear axle. I've disconnected the rear shock, disconnected the sway bar from the axle itself. I'll probably go up here and disconnect it from the chassis as well once I get the other side, and I'll just drop that sway bar assembly completely out of the way. You can see the lower control arm right there. It's mounted to the chassis. We'll leave that there for now. I have unbolted it from the axle. I've also undone the 4 bolts holding the axle. So you undo those 4 bolts, tap the axle out, and then you can remove this whole brake shield dust assembly. I'm going to be reusing that on the Dana 44. That stuff is all the same, and that axle didn't come with that stuff. So my goal is to leave all the brake lines attached so I don't have to bleed everything. Lots of spray lubricant a few days leading up to this, and it's come apart pretty easily. I've gone ahead and disconnected the drive shaft, some brake lines on the other side. I still have basically all of this to do on the other side. The jack is underneath the axle. I've also got one over here. The chassis is up on jack stands, so I'll be able to unbolt everything, drop the axle out, and hopefully just wheel it out on the jack. Like I said, now I've got that upper A-arm triangulated 3-link thing taken out. Let's go over to the bench and take a closer look at that. Here is that upper control arm piece. That rear axle, instead of using 2 separate control arms and a panhard bar, which is what a lot of rear suspensions with coil springs it uses 2 lower control arms and then this triangulated upper. So this joint and that joint are rubber bushings, and actually I'm going to pick that up later. We're going to take a closer look at why I actually took this out. And those mount to the chassis, and then that mounts to basically a ball joint, which I'll show you in just a second. And I've got a glove there just so you can kind of get it for size. Kind of not a terrible design, really. Those bushings are what fails, and obviously when you replace them, you know, the better bushings you get, the longer they're going to last. And also, if you're not running a lift kit, it takes a lot of stress off of those, and then adding a lift does stress those, which is why we're going to hop up to the bench, take a look at that ball joint, why I'm took this out and why I'm going to replace it, and a part that we're going to install to help alleviate some of that stress. Okay, first off, this is the ball joint. These 3 bolts attach it to the top of the diff, the pumpkin of the axle, and then yeah, it is just a ball joint in there. And I've replaced this. Well, it's been a while, and I honestly expected it to be shot, but the boot is all in good shape. There's no grease seeping out of it, and it's tight. So we're gonna go ahead and reuse that. When you're trying to, if you needed to replace this or that A-arm assembly, 99% of the time you're gonna have to unbolt this from the axle while it's still in that upper arm, because it, like I said, it's a ball joint, so it wedges down on this, and there's never enough space to try and pry them apart or hammer them apart. Once I pulled that arm out, which is pretty easy, there's a couple brake lines bolted to it, and then the 2 bolts attaching it to the chassis, you can kind of fish it out. It's not too bad. And then I laid it out on a couple 4x4s and just gave this, there's no threads at the top, so you can hit it with a hammer. Gave it a whack with a hammer and it popped right out. So that's not a big deal. So this is that arm. It's basically stamped steel, and then it's got a plate welded in the bottom. I've replaced these bushings before as well. Tip, if you need to do this, just buy the whole arm, because the problem you run into trying to press these bushings out, because it is just stamped steel, unless you live somewhere where there's no rust, it's going to make it really hard to press those out. Not only will it make it hard to press them out, it's going to distort the metal when you press them out, and more than likely the new ones will not fit properly or snugly, and yeah, it's just not a good thing. What happens with these is, I'm going to try and show this on camera. I don't know if it's going to focus, but here's the bolt hole, steel sleeve around the outside, and then there's rubber in here, and this is flex. And this rubber inside, obviously, you know, it's thinner. It's like fingers holding it so it can flex. It fails. It cracks and it fails, and this one has started doing it. It's probably, between the 2 of them, they're probably 50% failed. And I had a little bit of a clunk in the rear, like a suspension clunk, leading up to this, and I kind of suspected. So I'm going to just be ordering a new one of these, because yeah, it's pretty sad. We'll get that. What else? I don't even... Oh, the part that is going to help with the stress of this ball joint. So obviously, when you lift the vehicle, that arm where it's attached to the vehicle is going to drop down, and it's going to create a lot of stress on those rubber bushings. I was only at 2 inches of lift, so it wasn't a big deal, but I'm going to go up another inch. So it's going to put even more stress on those bushings. So lots of companies have these spacers. This one I've got used off Facebook. I believe this is an Iron Rock one, and it's just made out of billet aluminum. It's machined. You just use longer bolts, put the ball joint on top, and it spaces it out, so it helps correct the angle of that A-arm. Pretty simple solution, and even new these things aren't that expensive. Some people make them out of steel, so it'd be 2 steel plates and then a piece of steel tubing and some reinforcement. And yeah, just use longer bolts. Other than that, yeah, it's going pretty well. I've got my control arms out. These are for the front. I was getting these set to recommended lengths to start out with. So these are the lowers, and I've got some used uppers. I need to hit these with the old flap disc and clean some of the bubbled powder coat off and give them some Rust-Oleum finish. Other than that, hope you guys are all staying healthy, staying sane, being locked up, and it's just craziness. There's a little kid.
Dinner's ready.
Dinner's ready. Okay. We'll go ahead and wrap the video up then. Next week, probably more of the Jeep, and maybe Hawkeye Sr. will be over helping me manhandle that rear axle into place. So, as always, there are links down below to follow over to my social medias, whatever name they may be under. And keep your eyes open for a new logo coming soon, hopefully. And as of right now, my email address has stayed the same because it's just an email address. So HawkeyeSkunkWorks@gmail.com. It's not associated to a business or profit or anything. So we'll leave that alone for now. Thank you for watching. And until next week, take care. Goodbye.